Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our first Yes panel. We had a really lovely morning of programming, and we're excited for this afternoon's sessions. My name is Anna Rita Mores, and I'm the chair for the School of Design at George Brown College. I'm excited to welcome all of you to today's panel discussion entitled Design During and After the Pandemic. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that George Brown College is located on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and other Indigenous people who have lived on this land over time. We're grateful to share this land as treaty people who learn, work, and live in the community with each other. Across the School of Design, we remain committed to identifying and removing systemic barriers to accessing college programs and services, and are committed to working towards strategies, tools, and actions to better support our Indigenous student population. It's undeniable that design responds to a changing world, and there are no shortage of major change and monotony over the last 2 years. Now, while the pandemic is far from over, our relations to things, spaces, and one another across the world of design has been lastingly altered. As we look at the way that design landscape has changed over the last 2 years, education will need to respond accordingly to ensure learners are prepared to hit the ground running when they graduate. But how has the world of design changed in this time? Today, I'm joined by the School of Design's very best industry partners, faculty members, students, alumni, who will share their experiences that have characterized their lives over the last 2 years, including challenges, barriers, and opportunities. I encourage the audience to ask any questions you may have via the chat, and we'll share them with our panelists. With that, I would like to take a moment to introduce all of today's panelists. Claire Dawson is a creative director and co-founder of Toronto-based design agency Underline Studio. Underline has twice been named Design Studio of the Year by the Advertising and Design Club of Canada. Underline's client list is consciously diverse, ranging from corporate and retail enterprises to media and publishing organizations to educational and cultural institutions. Claire's work has been widely published and honored with awards from some of the most distinguished national and international competitions, including DNAD, the New York Type Directors Club, the One Show, and Graphis. She is currently president of the board of the Advertising and Design Club of Canada. Welcome, Claire. Blair Francie joined Trajectory in 2017 after 10 years of successfully running his own business, BF Design. His work features and includes branding, website design, market strategy, and print design for a variety of organizations. His clients range from small not-for-profit to large-scale educational institutions, including Toronto Arts Council, the Toronto Public Library, and Algoma University, among many others. In 2012, Blair graduated with distinction from Goldsmiths University of London with a Master of Arts. He's also a founder of the Department of Imaginary Affairs, a not-for-profit focused on civic engagement, programs for youth and newcomers, and a part-time professor at the School of Design at George Brown College, where he teaches in the brand design program. David Raphael is a UI designer at Toronto-based agency BIM and a recent alumni of George Brown College's School of Design in the graphic design program. He has a background in interaction design, advertising, and branding. BIM is an award-winning agency working with a spectrum of clients ranging from President's Choice, the Heart Stroke Foundation, Leon's Furniture Store, and Audi North America. David primarily collaborates with a range of team members across this globe and different companies to deliver user-centric interfaces and motion design for Audi USA and Canada, while also working on a variety of other projects for BIM itself. Welcome, David. Jasmine is an art director and graphic designer, fueled by her passion for creating meaningful solutions. Her work explores the intersection of design, strategy, introspection, and social good. She holds an advanced diploma from George Brown College's School of Design in graphic design, majoring in communications. She's currently obtaining her honors bachelor degree in brand design at the same institution. When she's not creating, she spends time journaling, learning about astrology, and organizing her Google Calendar as a true Capricorn does. Finally, we have JP Carrillo, who is a visual identity designer and design strategist who is passionate about dance, theater, and typography. An intuitive visual thinker by nature, he also utilizes logic when creating design solutions. Lists and schemes are his best partners in the creative process. On his journey of finding purpose, he discovered design through dance. He initially understood concepts like tension, hierarchy, rhythm, and storytelling through movement and evolved this mastery to shapes, colors, and letters. JP graduated from University Centro, Mexico City in 2017 with a BFA in visual communication. He is also a soon-to-be graduate from the Interdisciplinary Design Strategy program, where he's been learning how to understand situations from a holistic perspective, framing the right problems, addressing the right users, and providing the right solutions. That's a great group. All right, it's time to get started with our discussions. I have a question that I'd like to start off with, and it's a big one. It's one that goes to the whole group. We're now more than 2 years into the pandemic. I'm sure that lots of us packed up our desks at some point in the middle of March and thought we'd be back at the office in 4 to 6 weeks. The world changed in tremendous ways, and the world stayed the same in tremendous ways. My first question to you is, can you talk a little bit about what has changed and what has not changed over the last 2 years in your world of design? Maybe we could start with Blair or Claire, and then we'll move to David and Jasmine and JP.
Sure. Well, so what's kind of interesting is today's actually my second day back in the office. So after 2 years, I'm back in at my desk, which is kind of a surreal feeling. Yesterday I got really tired at about 3 o'clock and just wanted to pack it in and go home. But my bed wasn't next to me, so I couldn't do that. But I think things have, I mean, definitely for us, we're a small team. There's only about 7 of us all together. And prior to the pandemic, you know, we would all, I can see my colleagues' desks from here. We would all sort of like chat one-on-one with one another. We'd go into the boardroom and do things to talk about the projects we're working on. But we had to quickly learn how to use Slack properly, how to, you know, what is Miro? How do we do, you know, that in terms of collaborating and sharing the work that we're working on, and being able to discuss things in a way that replicated the way that we would go into the boardroom with our pieces of paper and sit down and kind of like mark up each other's papers and all that kind of stuff. And so it was a really big adjustment, and we're still, you know, 2 years in, still trying to figure out how to unmute ourselves before our meetings, and to have meaningful conversations. I think, and I was reflecting on this the other day, I think the one thing that I really miss, and I'm really excited about coming back into the office, and hopefully more of my colleagues will be back in sooner rather than later, is just that sort of energy that we get from being in the same space. You literally don't feel that energy, you know, over a screen. And so it's that is the one thing that I have missed the most about it, and can't be replicated over Zoom or Google Meet.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point there. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Claire.
No, it was everything that Blair said applies to us as well. And I'd say that it's everything, we do everything the same, like in terms of what we do. You know, we still, you know, deal with clients, brainstorm, do the work, supply files, work with all sorts of different external suppliers. And I guess it's just the ways we do it are what has changed. And in some ways, it's those ways changing has been great. And other ways, it's been more difficult. Like for us, for our studio, you know, moving to things like Slack and Asana has helped, because we have been able to chart our workflow in a better way. And it's not quite as organic as it might have used to be. But in other ways, it's also easy to get in touch with clients and book a quick Zoom and to have meetings. But in other ways, it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to art direct, to work closely with designers, to brainstorm productively, to kind of sit in a room together and have moments where nobody says something and then something else pops into your head and, oh, but what about this? And then and everything takes longer. You'd think that things would get a lot faster, but it really didn't. Like, everything takes longer.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people have sort of lamented about, and you lose that serendipitous sort of conversation point. It feels now like you have a meeting scheduled at 12, you're right into it. There's none of that sort of preliminary talk about the weekend or how your dog's doing or whatever the case may be. So it seems like things are a lot more business focused. I noticed both you and Blair kind of talked a little bit about the difficulty of replicating that in-person interaction and engagement point. Are there certain strategies that you've adopted to make things a little bit better, or to try to kind of get to that space?
Certain things. I mean, some things just aren't replicatable. Like a lot happens in like, you know, the drive-by getting water from the water cooler. You know what I mean? Like, oh, that conversation. Oh, that's actually not what I meant. I meant to do it this way. And but that's also interesting how you're doing that. Or, hey, I love that. That looks great. That's a good idea. Let's try that. So I don't know that.
Can I add something to that actually? Or
yeah, please.
Funny note. We actually have a Slack channel at my work called Water Cooler Conversations.
Yes, and we have a funny random one, and I guess that's a good way to answer the question, Anna Rita. We do have that. We have like a typography channel. We have so in those ways we've tried to figure out ways to share. But it's been tricky.
Ours was full of Wordle for a long time. Everybody's daily scores of how you're doing and whatnot. I think also the just being able to sort of like pop over or see someone what they're working on, you know, kind of behind their backs in a way, but it just kind of spurs on conversation and sort of like, oh, that's an interesting direction you're going in. And as much as we've tried to use Miro as that kind of tool to be able to do that, it's just not quite the same. And it's, you know, trying to also get people to be like, you can put your work up there and we can iterate it on it, as opposed to waiting till we have an internal review of something and then comment on it. You know, it's just a little bit easier. I mean, using Miro in that way sort of replicates that kind of like over the shoulder look a little bit, but it's not.
It's a huge thing in education. A lot of the professors at the start of the pandemic talked a lot about how much peer-to-peer training, mentorship, education happens. And it's exactly the space of like, you're in a computer lab, there's 30 computers, you can kind of see what some of your peers are doing. And obviously that was kind of really upended in the pandemic. Faculty had to kind of think of what ways they're going to sort of strategize critiques and how you know, virtually sort of pin things up for critique sessions. So I think it's a really good point. And even having, you know, a Slack channel with inspiration or kind of these water cooler conversations, it's a much more deliberate act, right? It's like you have to go into that space and add the thing as opposed to the sort of like serendipitous conversation points that happen. David, you were onboarded to BIM during the pandemic. You finished last year as a graduate of the graphic design program and then got a job and went on your way. So I think a lot probably has changed for you in the last 2 years. Can you talk a little bit about that shift?
Yes, there was a ton. So actually, I feel like a lot of the points were hit where my beginning kind of first half of school was in person, of course. And then I feel like I was accustomed to that. We touched on a lot of points with that where it was a lot more natural and people could interact with each other and just kind of even just directly go and get reviews really, really quick. And it was a lot more fast paced, I found. Whereas as soon as the pandemic happened, I feel like everything completely shifted. And in terms of just what shifted, I guess, I feel like when the semester started, it was a lot more obviously adjustment, but then specifically, I found that honestly, I feel like it was a little more lonely, or a lot more lonely, I should say. Everything.
We were all lonely.
Yeah,
everybody.
Exactly. Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. Everybody was so lonely, but then it was like, it was interesting because then even like in my thesis class, it was just that lack of bouncing ideas off of each other and just all of that, where I feel like for myself, at least, I feel like I'm a little critical of myself, at least. And the lack of feedback and the touch points made it a lot more difficult for me. I feel like it was this constant thing where I didn't know what to expect when I would review my work or even just present anything. So it kind of skewed my perspective. I feel like on another note, I guess the lack of collaboration, I guess, was just kind of interesting because it was a lot more collaborative, obviously, in the beginning. But then when it was just not entirely, just more self-driven work, I found that it did kind of benefit in a way. I will say that, honestly, where just I feel like it made me more believe in myself. And when I was meeting with people and sharing my work, it did kind of train me to be like, you know what, I feel like as a designer, I'm going to go with what I believe in. And a lot of the time I found that there were perspectives that came, and they were really helpful. But then I feel like by the end of it, I was proud to be like, this is my work. Like, especially with thesis, it was entirely self-driven. So yeah, it was especially, sorry, you were saying about onboarding?
Yeah, and so you had this huge monumental big finish with thesis, and then
Yeah.
you started working. How shortly thereafter did you start working?
2 weeks after. So I was kind of prepping.
2 weeks. Wow.
Yeah. I was prepping before graduation, just because I know that it's kind of like, it's tough to kind of get into the industry. But I was prepping during March break, and then just getting my website updated, updating my resume. Actually, really important note, updating my LinkedIn, which I didn't really even have. But I just updated everything. I was adding people, reaching out to different people, even just in the area that I didn't know, and talk to them and ask for advice. So yeah, I was just sending, even before I graduated, sending applications, trying to do my best to secure something. And I was lucky enough to get it 2 weeks after. And yeah, I feel like just in general, the onboarding, I will say that, I mean, it was a fully remote atmosphere, and all of the preparation, just the unintentional preparation of doing school remotely, made the transition really kind of interestingly easy. I mean, in some ways, but for the most part, actually, I will take that back and say that it was a huge adjustment. I feel like just entering into the professional atmosphere, or just, yeah. Yeah, there was a lot going on.
If I could jump in on something you said, David, which was meaningful to me, is when you talked in the beginning about, feedback, and kind of when you're starting in your career, it's so important that dynamic between, someone who's had more experience and understanding the decisions that they're making as you are showing your work, and you're kind of narrowing things down. I had a discussion with a designer a month or so ago, and I hadn't even realized it, but yeah, like I got a PDF and said, okay, let's go with this one. Let's make this red. All those things, because it's just so busy and there's so many things going on. It didn't strike me until that moment that, oh, right, like she also wants to know why that one and why blue is better than red and all those things, which is so easy to do in person and so difficult to do remotely.
Yeah. I found that it was a lot of like, I mean, it still is like a lot of touch points. Just like, even I was talking with my creative director. I feel like initially when it first started, I was getting like really in my head about just like, am I doing all right? Am I doing all right? And he's like, honestly, if we were in office, you could literally be like, hey, and then just come over here, see what's going on. And so he's like, just don't worry. Like, this is how it is right now. And I found that it was 100% like that in class. That adjustment to a kind of slower, allotted time sort of structure was really, really kind of major.
Yeah, that's something that I think a lot of people are talking about as well, is this sort of idea of, to your point, Claire, around, having folks understand what you mean. It almost feels like the sort of one of the primary skills that graduates have to have is really strong communication skills, really good listening skills. You almost have to be able to listen to the things people aren't saying as well. So something to remember for those that are coming out the gate in the next couple of weeks. I wanted to turn to Jasmine and JP to ask the same question around what has changed for you and what hasn't. Jasmine, I know that you've continued on in your studies and went from the graphic design program to brand design. JP, you moved from an entirely different country to come to the IWB. So what kinds of things feel really different from you, and how much of that is pandemic related and how much of that is life focused? Why don't we start with Jasmine?
Yeah, I think Claire, and David hit a lot of the points that I was going to say. And I want to circle back to something that Blair said about, I'm tired at 3 p.m. and I want to just hop in bed, but now my bed is no longer there. I feel like over the past few years, what has stayed the same is like our want to be in person, our want to be collaborative and be around people. We're definitely missing that just engagement with other people. But what has changed over the past couple of years is like our fatigue with transitioning. And I know that, I've been lucky enough to come back to the campus about 2 times a week at most. And then I don't know how I ever commuted to school 5 days a week before. Like, I'm already exhausted just from commuting for 2 days, being there all day. So I think that has been something that's difficult for me, at least, transitioning and like taking how I've kind of gotten used to, how I've gotten comfortable over the past 2 years, and what I'm going to be taking into when I continue school in person, when I enter the workforce in person, you know?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Jasmine. I think a lot of people are also, a lot of organizations, a lot of studios, a lot of firms are thinking about, whether their work is going to be remote first, if they're going to have, sort of hoteling desks, if they're going to be a hybrid working space. And I think a lot of that is obviously important considerations. And as people start to apply to work and figure out where they want to situate themselves, that, not to kind of overuse the work-life balance thing, but I think a lot of people are wondering, how did I do this 5 days a week? And I'm with you. When I go to campus, what is really nice is the ability to get out and see people and really get the steps in, because on average, if I don't go to campus, I'm getting anywhere between 1,000 and 1,700 steps, and that's generous. But on the days that I'm there, I come home and I'm like, why am I so tired? And it's because you've spent a lot of time walking and engaging. I'm gonna go to JP to answer the same question.
Yeah, sure. Well, for me, yes, it was not only packing a desk, it was basically packing a life and a dog, and introducing myself to a new context, which was really interesting. But I also, when it comes to being a student again, I love old school methods. Like, I have a notebook and I like to sketch on the printed file, and that interaction for me was, at least for the first like month and a half, it was really hard for me to understand and to acknowledge the fact that I needed to be open again to learn new software. And yeah, it was definitely a challenge. But also on the other side, when I was like to see the opportunity behind things, and I think that two things that have stood out the most for me during the pandemic as an active designer and as a student are patience and empathy. Like, and I see it now that we have transitioned back into the studio in person. We are really patient with each other when it comes to trying to understand what the other is trying to see, and finding like a middle ground. And I think that's the consequence of you having to being patient about if someone has a dog barking in the back, or someone making renovations, or the fire alarm setting up. Like, those small details have, I don't know, reinforced our patience and also empathy. I feel like there has never been, at least in our lifetimes, one thing that affected all of us at the same level. And I mean, I know a couple of you, but I feel like right now we can agree in multiple things that we have experienced, even though we haven't met. So that brings, I think, a different level of connection amongst us. So, but yeah, definitely an interesting experience.
I like that point around empathy and patience. Definitely, I think patience, for better or for worse, is something that a lot of us have had to learn or grow in for sure over the last 2 years. I'm going to jump to an audience question because I think it's really pertinent here, and it's been something that I've thought a lot about in the last 2 years. And I want the disclaimer to be that I love students and I love faculty. But what happens when, in this world that we're living in, you are always reachable? You are expected, or there's this default that you're always online, right? So you get onboarded remotely, you take all your classes remotely, you work in a studio-based environment remotely. And I think, in March 2020, I would send emails at all hours because there was nowhere to go. I was living in a little bit of like fear and paranoia of what was happening on the outside. And so that connection point, and going back to what David and Claire mentioned around being lonely, it was kind of like you were grasping to, help each other out and be part of this unit. And now we've gotten ourselves into some habits that I think can be a little bit tricky. How are folks feeling the same kind of burn? And if so, how do you respond to that? Have you figured out a way to set up some healthy boundaries? And if so, please tell me what they are. Yeah, anybody want to take a crack at this one first?
Yeah, well, go for it.
No, go ahead, JP.
At least for me, the past 2 years has been a constant exercise of being with myself, right? So I think that the first step, at least for me, was identifying my own boundaries, because there's a difference between, yes, you need to work from 9 to 5, but also what if you enjoy working from 7 to 10 p.m. and that works for you and that's not burning you out? So I think that first is identifying your own boundaries and then communicating them to whoever you're working with.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I would agree with that 100%. And I think also that, I mean, a lot of with the advent of technology, obviously, and email and whatnot, we've all sort of become pre-pandemic anyways. There was a lot of like emails being sent after hours and all that kind of stuff, but you just kind of was like, I'll deal with that later. But then when you're at home and you're constantly getting bombarded by clients at all hours and whatnot, I had to really learn to set boundaries and what that actually meant. And that, if a client's like, I sent you, if they email me the next day, they're like, I sent you an email yesterday, and I check back, I'm like, yeah, you sent it at 7:00 and I was having dinner. Like, I'll respond when I get to the office or like my office. But even that, like little tricks of using that new focus feature on the iPhone or the Mac, right, where it's like stop getting notifications after a certain hour, I think really helped just set up some boundaries in that regard, and being honest with the clients and just kind of saying, I will get back to you. I will respond in due course. I try to respond within 24 hours. And for the most part, people are open to that, I think.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think, again, like communicating that boundary is super, super, super important. I always feel really weird when I put an out of office in my inbox now, and I have to say, like, I'm away from my virtual desk. Like, it's just a weird language thing that we've kind of all just recalibrated on. And I find it interesting that we're still kind of using some of these out of office emails for days where you're away for one day. Like 9 out of 10 times nothing happens in that one day that is catatonic. But yeah, I think we're always really concerned about what would happen or what could happen. And it seems like this ongoing struggle with ourselves. Jasmine,
also, sorry, if I could just.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just add one more quick thing. In terms of also boundaries with clients, but also being okay with taking time for yourself. And that was something I had to be 100% okay with. When I was working at home, and I'm like, I just actually need 30 minutes to eat my lunch away from my desk and not look at my email. And that was something that it took a little bit, because I was kind of like, oh, but what if no one is coming in my door or looking in my window saying, why aren't you at your desk? Why aren't you working? We need to get, the projects from you ASAP. But there was it was something that I had to sort of be okay with. And also, literally, there were a couple of days where I was like, I'm exhausted and I'm going to take a nap, and that's okay. And I'm going to be okay with that, and I'll respond to the emails after I get back from that. So.
Yeah, that's
great. I feel like just to add or share my perspective, I actually saw a post today where it said, like, if you're out of work and you're still thinking of work, that's still work. Like, especially if you're in this culture now where we're super kind of like ingrained. Like, even I have Slack on my phone, I get my emails sent straight there, and sometimes I snooze them. But for the most part, I think about how, I remember when I first started, my creative director, he told me, he was like, if you are burnt out, if you are sick, if you are not feeling well, that affects your creativity too. So I feel like it's important to, if you feel like you need to like snooze, or if you need to set those boundaries with clients, then you should be able to, because it does affect your creativity.
I guess it can also go back to that saying, you teach people how to treat you too. Like, I mean, with our, I'm lucky in that myself and my co-founder Fidel, we have very similar work ethics. So 9 to 5, we're very intense in that Slack channel. Like, it's ping, ping, ping from everybody, emails that are flying. But like after, when the workday is done at 5, like we turn it off. And I think we learned that, 10, 13 years ago when we had young families and we kind of had to put those practices into place. So it was kind of natural for it to go over through now to this pandemic time. But I do find that with clients, like, I mean, yeah, I will still like, oh, check my email at like 8 o'clock, but I'll never answer them unless it's like a 911 emergency, because in that way, I don't want them to know that I'm checking and that this might be okay for me to answer them.
Your secret's out if they're watching.
I know. I don't think they are.
But it's a really, really good point. And I find that I was doing this definitely a lot at the start of the pandemic. I was sending emails at 8 or 9 o'clock or so, and then realizing that people were responding rapid fire, and I didn't want to set that intention that people had to respond right away. There's a really good audience question. I'm going to go to it. It's from Arjit, and Arjit asks, being online has helped those without a loud voice still have a say with online chat and voting tools. How do you make these people feel included after coming back in person? I think it's a really, really good point. A lot of people have really thrived in this space. How do we kind of make it a little bit more inclusive for folks?
Yeah, we have within our cohort a particular member. She's pretty silent, but I call her Ninja San because she doesn't need to talk that much to be killer with the way she's thinking, right? And I think the key to this part is, I don't know, I feel like identifying the strengths in others first, because I think that a lot of the times when it comes to in-person interactions, you don't allow yourself to hear and to listen to the other or what they're saying. And when you are on Zoom or like whatever, you literally need to be quiet and listen to the other say what they want to say. So I think that we really need to be aware of the potential, but also the strengths of the other and leverage them, and taking advantage of silent is not always bad. So yes.
I have a friend who often puts out this question and says, do you think to talk or do you talk to think? And I think, typically you're either one or the other, right? And so I'm always marveled at people that are very, very quiet and they have this sort of dark horse tendency where when they say something, you're like, whoa, that was huge. Where did that come from? Right. And so it's always really, really lovely to be surrounded by folks who have this kind of way of thinking. And I think, this pandemic time, everyone has really said, man, it must be so hard to be an extrovert and be, in social isolation and not see people. But on the other side of that, when you kind of have this return to routine, what's it like for folks who have really had a really comfortable space in this time? So I think your point, JP, is a really good one. I wanted to jump to a question around education. And obviously in March of 2020, what we were trying to do across the college and at lots of other institutions was figure out a way to get students to the finish line. We didn't know what was in store for the next 20 months or so, but definitely we weren't making major changes to our curriculum. Now that we're 2 years or 2+ years into the pandemic, there are a lot of things that educators, curriculum developers, deans, chairs are thinking quite a bit around in terms of the design landscape and how we prepare learners to succeed. And so my question really is, are there specific strategies or things within the curriculum that aren't present that you think would be ideal for this changing design landscape? And that question for Blair and Claire is, what are specific things that you're looking for in new hires that perhaps you wouldn't have been looking for 2 years ago? David, on your side, are there specific things that as you were applying to work that you felt were more important to have? And I know you talked a little bit about that education piece and having been an online learner and understanding how to transition that space. And then also JP and Jasmine, thinking about your experiences within the last year of remote learning. Are there specific things that you feel maybe you need to train up a little bit on or you need to upskill on? So I'll go to Blair and Claire first, and then David and Jasmine and JP.
I guess from my side, these wouldn't be new qualities, but I guess even more than ever, organization and really good communication skills. So, knowing how to write an email really well, to ask questions, all those kind of listening, all the stuff that we've talked about, even more important than ever, because you don't, as we've said, you're not sitting at a desk where you can overhear things. So you've got to make sure that if you've got a question, you get it answered, and that when you need clarification, you're asking exactly the question that you need answered. And then, in terms of organization, man, it is like we're still struggling with, where are we going to keep files on the server? Are we going to use Dropbox? And just being able to, first of all, manage the content you get in from a client in a really organized and stay on top of it kind of way. I guess the kind of the skills that you don't necessarily think of as a graduate. And then in turn, taking all those files, saving them into one spot, keeping them all super organized. Creative is one piece of the puzzle, but those other kind of softer skills are really becoming more and more important.
If you figure out a way to do that, Claire, let me know.
I don't see an end in sight.
And I would totally agree with everything you just said. I think communication and being able to talk about the work is so important, especially when you're presenting to a client. You have to be able to sell the story behind the brand or the design, and really not just show them the design, but say, like, this is why we made these decisions, and this is why it's the right one to move forward with, or whatever the case may be. And writing an email is so, it seems like such a small thing, but it's such a big thing. Being able to clearly communicate and clearly, say why you're making choices or what the project is, or, I was just writing a creative brief this morning for a project, and you just have to really dive into it and be able to clearly communicate, again, the reasoning behind everything. So communication, I think, is the most key thing coming out of this.
Writing an email politely, like it's strange.
Yeah.
This is a very basic thing, but it is so easy for like a nuance and the tone to shift, and it's kind of, you can forget as a design student and then a junior or someone starting, that like design is really, it is a service still. And we've got clients, and we need to coax them along a process and get them to the finish line. So you're also kind of being very politely kind of a bulldog along the thing, but politeness and effectiveness in email writing, very important.
My background's actually in playwriting, and I would always tell people when they're like, what are you writing these days? I'm like, a lot of well-structured emails, because it's really important so that you are able to itemize and get across your ideas without any confusion, so that you're not missing deadlines or mixing up design concepts, all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, that's great. David, not to put you on the spot, but what were you missing when you started work?
What was I missing? Honestly, I feel like, for the most part, honestly, I actually feel like I underestimated even just like the most random things and how they could be applicable to what I was doing. Like, for example, like in general, I feel like this sounds a little bit obvious, but you can really, I feel like just from the education that you get, you can really apply everything that you've learned to your job hunt. So I'm talking about research. You can research where you want to work, like really heavily go into the research, empathizing with yourself and what your desires are with what you want. I feel like even when I was kind of just like hunting, I feel like even my perspective was like, I need to get the first job that I get. And even if it's somewhere like that, it's not entirely what I want to do, whether it's print, like personally, I like UI more and like UX. So just kind of empathizing with what you want, and then planning and strategizing how you're going to get there, and how you're going to get to where you want to be. Discussing your goals, and just kind of taking advantage of the network that you have of your peers, and even just like kind of setting up, like I mentioned before, a LinkedIn and reaching out to different designers. Like, I feel like all of these things, like they were kind of and even just kind of the software, like we mentioned Miro and all these different programs where all of what we've learned is really, really applicable. Where it's kind of funny, I had a coffee chat with like this designer that I was talking to on LinkedIn, and he mentioned that during the pandemic, he actually, while he was hunting for a job, took a kind of like a project upon himself where he added everybody he could and set up coffee chats. And for the people that it was all designers, everyone who agreed, he recorded it and then made a case study out of everything that he learned from talking to his people. And it's like, it's all these different kind of little things that I feel like kind of should be emphasized. For example, again, I feel like one of the biggest things I can speak on is LinkedIn, and just kind of like how you're presenting yourself. And we did touch on copy, and that totally is kind of encompassed in all this as well. So it's a ton of different things, but a lot about, I feel like, just the different kinds of connection in general, whether it be collaboration tools or just talking to different people and networking. So I feel like I touched on a ton of different things there, but
no, it's a great point. I think that this idea too is making connections and using the tools that you have at your disposal. Obviously, a lot of the students at the School of Design take a professional practice class or a studio-based class or something that's a portfolio design course to start to do some of that outreach, to start to tell the narrative of who you are as a designer and where you want to work. And I think sometimes people leave and they think, oh, I did that for credit, but you're not realizing you're doing that for the credit of your life, actually. So I think really, really good point to mention there. I'm going to jump to JP and Jasmine on things that maybe you're feeling anxious about, but as you start to think about what's on the horizon.
Yeah, I think with being online and kind of transitioning into the work field soon, some things that I've taken note of in my program, at least, and just like working online, is that there's a lack of collaboration. I think we've gotten all used to working in silos and just like doing our own thing. And although it's like faster to just do your own thing, I think we're really missing out on collaborating with people. And that's something that's missing in our skill set, but also missing just, interacting with people. I remember in class one day, we were asked to do like an in-class assignment on Miro. I was put into a group with a few other students, and then I turned on my mic, I turned on my camera, and I was like, okay, hey guys, what kind of things are we gonna put together for this in-class assignment? They were already working. They were already like going away, putting their sticky notes. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm the only one collaborating. So I think that's something that's missing going into the workforce, and something that we should take note of and try to work on as students and as people in industry on how we can better connect with people. And if that so happens to be like outside of the classroom or outside of the workday, just like connecting with people and talking to them, getting to know them more, I think that'll really help with coming back in person.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jasmine. And JP, your program, Jasmine's program as a sort of Bachelor of Brand Design program, is obviously a little bit more self-directed, a little bit more individualistic. JP, you're in a postgraduate program that's, what we term as a 9-month intensive. You're working very closely with other designers and non-designers that are within the program. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience has been like and that sort of collaboration space?
It has been, at some point, someone asked me if IDS was the thing that I expected. And I said, no, it was way much better. I think that one of the things that has made this process really interesting is when each and every one of us have acknowledged the fact that we may not know something. And that's the reason we are a team. And and I also feel like people are afraid to set boundaries, but we have managed to to set them in a kind way, and not being, you don't need to be harsh with your boundaries. And I think that and it took us a while. That's why I always go back with patience. It took us 3 months to actually discover the synergy between all of us, right? And again, once we came back in person, we had to be patient again, because our energies in person are way different. So I think that, yeah, the irony of this joke of designers being never-ending iterators, we also need to do that at a personal level, and being okay with, okay, I need to step back, set a boundary, and then go again. And that also comes with not knowing. It's okay. It's fine. For me, it was all the online learning platforms. For me, it was, okay, I don't know how to use these, but I'm willing to know. And then, yeah, you keep moving forward. So it has been amazing, to be honest. Yeah.
It's good. It's one thing that I'm noticing is coming up a lot is conversations around boundaries, around the snooze, around burnout, not checking emails after 5, this kind of thing, and setting up those really healthy boundaries so that you're not pouring from an empty cup. Were some of these things part of your practices prior to March 2020, or are you making much more deliberate considerations going forward as a result of the sort of chaos of the last 2 years?
I think I'll try to answer this question. I think I've learned how to do that more during the course of the pandemic. I think before the pandemic hit, I was constantly like staying at school till 11 p.m. I was doing all the work all night and answering emails all the time. And I think I didn't really learn how to set boundaries until I was to the point of being really burnt out. And what I've learned over the course of the past 2 years is I'm not as effective and functional without having that time for myself, and being constantly on your computer, especially like in March 2020, when that's all you can do. It just really pushes you to the point where your body needs to take a break, and it'll take a break for you. I think that's something that you've said, Ana Rita. And for me, setting that boundary was physically leaving my desk when it hit 5 o'clock. I would go to the gym, like now that gyms are open, so that I separate myself for a little bit after work, or taking a midday walk, or getting a coffee, something small as that, to help me refuel myself, and so I'm not pouring out of an empty cup, like you said.
Yeah, it's a great point. That's sort of breaking up the day so that it does feel pretty different, because otherwise you could sit at your desk for 5 or 6 hours without interruption.
I feel like just to add to that as well, like when I first started, I remember it was like the pressure of just starting, like, I guess my first like job. And I was glued to my computer, like seriously, like glued, like staring, and just like I was expecting, like, they're tracking my movements. I need to like show that I'm like really productive. And I remember by the end of the day, after like a week, I was like, I really feel the Zoom fatigue. Like it was just like hardcore, like just I need to separate. And I remember I was talking to we have like every Friday like a design team, just like a meeting where we just talk and hang out, and to build that connection. And I was bringing it up, and they were like, what? Like, what is going, like, why? Like, you're just, you don't need to do that. Like, you can just, like, my one coworker was saying, like, I have like he got like some equipment, and he said he sometimes is just like in a meeting and he's like using it and just like talking, and then like hanging off of this thing to kind of just like get out of his seat. And then others are just like, oh, I'm just gonna throw in my laundry and come back and just like just make a coffee or whatever. They kind of have brought this to my attention, and I didn't realize that it was something that was so real. So yeah, I guess just realizing, honestly, I feel like just realizing that that's also part of the creative process, I guess, is just like taking time to think and do other things. So yeah.
I think that must have been super hard, David, to start with, like, right now, because all of the nuances that people like in person, that like, hey, everybody goes and grabs a coffee and we're always kind of chatting every now and then. I could see how that would have been super hard.
Yeah, I feel like earlier I was supposed to touch on like I did mention it was like an easy transition from like remote, but I will say like it was really intense. Like it was like I would honestly say like months of just adjustment where I thought I was ready, but then there was so many things, like even just fully kind of absorbing the client and like the projects, and then even just the agency and understanding it, and then understanding the programs and the different procedures and everything. It took so long, and having that be fully remote definitely, like I feel like we as a company adapted, but then otherwise it did differ from like the beginning of the school year where it was all in person and more of that connection. But yeah,
it's hard enough to start.
Yeah,
like in your career, like that's already just that base is super hard, and then you have this whole other layer on top of it.
Yeah, because then as well, like just to add to that, I feel like the biggest thing was kind of the just not really seeing unless I book like a shadowing, sort of like share your screen, I want to see what you're doing, or inspecting a file where there's another designer working. I feel like I didn't know how well I was doing, and like it was this constant thing, like am I doing okay, and because you can't really like talk to people unless it's on Huddle or just through video or whatever. But yeah, that was definitely kind of like a big aspect of it.
I think one of the things that like we haven't really talked about, but probably is huge here, is like finding your friends too, right? So like you get onboarded somewhere, or you're starting a new program, and like you don't know who your people are, because all of these commonalities where, you know, you see that someone's listening to a band that you're listening to, or someone's got on a pair of sneakers that you bought, or whatever, these sort of little intricacies that you can have dialogue about that are really just surface, they're kind of absorbed in this online space, right? And I think that makes it a little bit trickier sometimes too, when you don't know where your people are, and you don't know if, you know, you're going to make a joke and it's going to land. You don't know what people's sense of humors are like. There's all of these intricacies that we're not really taught to sort of engage in this way.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, this morning I was onboarding a new co-op student that's starting, and was really consciously trying to say, like, you'll learn, like, don't worry, the process of how we operate, you'll see. It's, you know, we're not she was asking me a question about who do I, you know, check in on a daily basis, like who do I show my work to on a daily basis. Like, you don't have to. You, like, we will, you know, we have our internal check-ins. We'll, you know, get to you when we you know, like, obviously if you have a question, check in with us, but there's not that expectation, and that's on the employers to make sure that this is loud and clear, that you do your work. We trust that you're going to do your work, and we'll you know, we'll have those meetings where we all get together and to talk about the work and feedback and whatnot. So it's okay to take some time.
I think it's nice to also set that kind of framework, and I think that's probably really reassuring to anyone that does get onboarded. David, it sounds like you had a similar experience as well, where you were kind of told, like, it's okay, you know, trust the process a little bit. And that's obviously a huge thing that designers hear time and time again. And so, you know, trust yourself a little bit and ask the questions when you have them. And obviously that's a good space to be in. I'm going to jump to an audience question from Samyukta, who asks, as a student looking to break into industry, how do you suggest we build a network in a remote setting? I know, David, you talked a little bit about the sort of coffee chat. Do you want to maybe just go over what that looks like and why that can be really scary for people to make that connection point?
Yeah, of course. So I feel like, I don't know, something that I realized when I was in school was just how, I don't know, I still keep in touch with friends, and I still even like bounce ideas off of like the friends that I made in school, which is like great. And I realized afterward, just like through other friends that I happened to make in life, that also work, either it was like development or even just in design, that they were taking these sort of initiatives, whether it be like coffee chats, like I already mentioned, where I realized that, like, for example, actually the person that brought it to my attention was my friend Danny, who he actually works at Salesforce, and it's not even design. He was doing like management or something, but he specifically brought that up, and he was like, I'm going to do a coffee chat. I kind of do that randomly, and I like talking to people. And he's like, I'm going to talk to somebody from LA. I'm going to be talking to like just all over the place. And I realized, I was like, wait, why am I not doing that? That's such a great way to build connections. And so I remember just kind of, that was when I started building my LinkedIn and just kind of focusing on that. And I realized that, I don't know, I just even got like random requests and stuff, and just like seeing people, I was like, oh, I really, there's this designer that I've always looked up to. I'm going to try adding them. And he actually, for example, there's one that actually accepted me, and we started talking, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, just even the chance of just being ghosted, I took that. It's not a big deal. I feel like it has happened, but the kind of payback or the outcome of that chance succeeding is so much more worth it. Where now I can say, like, even from the people that I work with, I've had great discussions about my own self-development, and even just random things that have inspired me. But then in general, also random people who I've never met in real life. I guess that's the power of like the age we're in now, where we can connect. It's brought a lot of great things for my life and just my career, but also just personal life in general too. But I guess to kind of answer the question of like how to break into it and just the suggestions of how to build a network is like maybe assessing how you particularly socialize, and then also just kind of looking into what you're using now, and just realizing that kind of breaking out of that discomfort and trying new things is something that is also part of the process. Whether it be, I don't know if it would be LinkedIn, it could also be like convention or whatever it is. It's just somewhere where there's like like-minded individuals, and you're most likely bound to meet somebody. Yeah.
I want to add to that, actually. I think you really hit it on the nail, David. I think connecting both of those questions, breaking into the industry and also finding your people. I think if you can look into your network and see somebody that you admire, or somebody who is where you want to be, it's a really good opportunity to reach out to them and ask them how they did that. I think like when midway through the pandemic, I reached out to you, Anna Rita, and I was like, hey, can you, like, I want to know more about your education, your pathway. Can you connect me with some people? And that really helped me, be involved with the Yes Committee and build my own community over the past 2 years. And then things have kind of circled back. I made new friends this year. A lot of them have just like messaged me either on LinkedIn or on Teams, and they said, I saw that you were involved last year with Yes. I would love to like hear more about how you got involved and how you built your network and how you, have made connections with people. And my biggest advice was just like reach out to people who are in a place that you want to be, and it wouldn't hurt to ask them how they got there. And people are always like, or mostly like pretty helpful with that, and they're willing to share their experience and their knowledge and help you out in any way that they can.
Yeah, and just sorry, one more thing to add that I feel like is important is like I was mentioning like finding how you communicate, and something that I feel like is so underrated that really, really like seriously helped me out was even just connecting to the professors that I had. Like, for example, I'm gonna shout out to Christine Doe, because I was like going through the application process, and I was like, she was doing such a phenomenal job as like the thesis professor. I was reaching out to her. Please don't do this if you have Christine as your thesis professor, unless she lets you, I guess. I don't want her to have like 10,000 messages. But I was kind of bouncing back. I was like, how do I prepare for this? Like, what do I do? And she was giving me such helpful feedback that's literally the kind of that was kind of like how I guess I got this position, was just like realizing that there are professionals they're like in my life, whether like just so many. That's why they're there to teach. So even if it's not reaching out to new people, it's also just realizing who's around you as well.
Yeah, I wanted to just go ahead, Claire.
No? Okay. I was just going to jump in from the other side. I think from David and Jasmine's ideas are all fantastic and great recommendations. Definitely as you can, because I mean, we've had a few recommendations from Anna Rita, and we'll always, I mean, her recommendations are great and so perfectly well suited for the type of people that would work well with our studio. So we really trust that. So she's part of our network. So knowing that it comes through a reference like her is very meaningful. And then from the other side of the coin, working is a lot. Like I've got young kids. I'm active in other areas with volunteer positions, and then a very busy work life. So it's hard to add other things in. And then also, carve out time for personal time, exercise, all that stuff. As much as I've done mentorships with George Brown, and I like to try and help as much as I can. But keep in mind that it is also very hard for people even to carve out 15 minutes for a coffee, because they're not even able to carve out 15 minutes for coffee on their own. So if you're going to get them to do it, I would also say do your research and be really thoughtful about it. Don't send a LinkedIn that just says, hey, can we grab a coffee? Because that's the easiest way to say no thanks. Because I'm sure you're a great person. I'm sure you've got the best of intentions, but also I've got so much other stuff going on. So if you're going to do a reach out, do your research, know what that person does, make it a thoughtful invitation that shows what they do, and you're prepared with some questions, a finite period of time. Spend some time thinking about it so that they know, okay, I will. This person's made an effort. I should make an effort too.
I totally agree with that. I feel like it's like the genuine intention instead of just like, hey, you're a designer, let's chat. Which I don't feel like is totally bad, but I will say just off that point as well, because I feel like this is also really important to add. When I was applying, they were doing RGD portfolio reviews. And so just that intention, I remember I signed up for it. I got my portfolio reviewed. I was like, be as like blunt as possible. And it was a great review. So much really great feedback. And by the end of that, I ended up adding this guy on LinkedIn, and we've actually kept in touch. He was like, feel free to reach out. Like he actually ended up reviewing portfolios for over 30 years. So I was like, this is insane. And it was just simply like, I didn't know who I was going to be matched with, but by the end of it, yeah, we connected. And from there, I recommended a friend who I was going to school with to do the same thing. They were still doing their reviews. She did it as well. Ended up as well connecting with her reviewer. And actually, they ended up saying to her, once you're done school, reach out to me as well. So like possibly for a job opportunity. So you never know who you're going to get. But at the same time, I guess if you're doing it intentionally and just kind of reaching out to people in general with that intention, then I guess it can also benefit you in that way.
Yeah, I think that that intentionality piece is really important. And obviously, portfolio reviews are a really great way to make a connection, but also continue to build your work and get some feedback from lots of different sources. I think it's a really, really important and pivotal step for students as well and junior designers to continue to evolve. And obviously the bulk of what's in your portfolio when you graduate is work that you've done in your class projects, right? And so continuing to build and grow and doing those portfolio reviews and making them part of your professional practice, I think is really critical. I also just wanted to note that in the last, I would say like 3 months, I've talked to 2 people who've let me know that both of them have reached out to Claire. They both run very successful design practices now, but when they were starting out, they wanted some advice on where to start and how to do invoices. And I thought it was just really lovely to have this sort of note that there are people who are doing really brilliant things who have, been reaching out to folks that are doing this work as well. So I think it's never too late to start, and also just being really deliberate and intentional. I'm going to go to one more audience question before I ask my final question. This question is 2 parts for multiple people on the panel. The first part is for Jasmine, JP, and David. What networking strategies do you wish you started sooner? And then we'll go to the question for Clara and Blair. So what networking strategies do you wish you started sooner?
Okay, as someone who English is not his first language, one thing that I would have done earlier is embrace the fact some of my cohort members say that I speak in a very romantic way, which is not a bad thing. So that's one of it. Like, okay, I will never sound like a native speaker, right? but I know how to communicate ideas in a romantic way. Okay, embrace that and take it as an advantage, and also identifying within myself, like, who am I? Because I'm pretty sure that we all here can open, let's say, Illustrator and draw something, right? But what makes it different is the way that we think and our personality. So yeah, I would embrace the good and the not so good, and go for it and identify what works for you.
For me, I think I wish I had gotten more involved with things in my community, whether that's like in my school community with the clubs or the committees that I've joined in my last year. I wish I had known about and started those sooner, and also events and community opportunities outside in the industry. I know like RGD and ADCC does a lot of things to get students involved or like people in the industry involved. LinkedIn as well. David's said everything about LinkedIn, and I think like everything is so true. Just like being intentional with the people that you reach out to, making connections with people that are in and out of design. There's a lot of things that you can learn from people outside of the design space that can still apply to your design practices and the way your skill set and just like your worldview as well. I think just expanding how you're thinking and the things that you're exposed to really help influence your design skills, and also the way that you speak to people and the things that you talk about rather.
David, anything to add? I know you talked a little bit about coffee chats and getting on LinkedIn and the sort of importance of a platform like that.
Yeah, so I feel like Jasmine also hit the nail on the head about like clubs and just initiatives in general, which 100% I can honestly say like really do count, and they can be so useful, whether it's like in interviews or wherever, even just on your profile, getting kind of the feedback on whether it's on LinkedIn, just because I know I did like a lecture like a few months ago for a class, and I was able to post that and share it, and also not only just share it to people on LinkedIn to kind of engage with, but also to my coworkers, who some of which didn't even know that's what I was doing. So yeah, I guess there's like so many different aspects of LinkedIn, but then also yeah, just like the point about clubs, different initiatives. Trying to think what else. Yeah.
Social media.
Sorry?
Social media as well, like in general.
Yeah.
A lot of agencies and designers are active on Instagram, and having your work up, but also having space to speak about other people's work is really pertinent to networking and getting to know people and making connections.
Very true.
That's a great point. Okay, the second part of the question from Lacey is for Claire and Blair. And so some students worry about bothering industry experts when networking outreach. I know this is a huge one. When we were trying to think of speakers and panelists for year-end show, everyone was like, oh, we can't email them, and what will they say, and what if they don't respond? And you know, my perspective is usually like, well, if they don't respond, they don't respond. You're not in any worse situation. And I know that we've talked a little bit about intentionality in your messaging, but what's your take on students reaching out or professionals reaching out for some advice or to connect?
Totally agree with everything that's been said. I guess the only thing in addition would be, yeah, it's not a bother. I mean, because it comes in your email, like, you know, it's not a big deal. And I would say if most people aren't responding is because they're super busy anyways. So they're not going to remember the name that came in the inbox and that they forgot to respond to. So following up with a second email is no big deal. Even a third email. It's really, I wouldn't say that's bothering. That's showing interest and eagerness. And I don't think either of those traits are a bad thing, unless you do it in a stalker way. But I trust that none of you will. And then again, just going back to the other point of doing it right. I mean, there's lots of emails we get that say, "Dear Hambly and Woolley, attached is my resume." And, you know, it's like, we can't overstate that. Like I've been asked by students when I got hired, And, I was a co-founder of the studio. So, just doing your research, because people won't have time for you if you don't, because you're asking something of them. So show that you put the effort in.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. And I think it's also on the flip side, from someone who has had coffee chats with designers before, I actually learn a lot from them as well, and just sort of like what their process has been. And I find it just as fulfilling. So I'm always happy to, if I have the time to, and like Claire said, you kind of do a bit of research and are able to articulate why you want to meet with coffee. Why you want to meet with coffee? I think I need some coffee.
You see how tired you are?
It's almost 3 o'clock. I need why you want to meet with them. Then I'm more than happy to have that conversation and help out as much as I can, because I'm actually also learning about what's happening in the industry through conversations with students and whatnot. So it is a two-way street. I see it as a two-way street, and I think we learn just as much from the conversations as you do. So
I think that's a really, really good point. Okay, we are almost out of time, and I just wanted to take a moment to ask one more rapid fire question. As question is for everybody. What advice can you offer from your perspective to this year's graduates? And why don't I start with Jasmine? You're first on my screen. No pressure.
Spot. Okay. Being a recent grad and also a current student is a very odd position to be in, especially in the midst of a pandemic and transitioning into being in person. But I think my biggest advice for current students and graduates, junior designers is I haven't had time to think about this, but I think, just like encapsulating everything that's been said, just reaching out to people, being intentional, having the courage to reach out to people to help get yourself where you want to be. Doing your research and figuring out what kind of space that you want to be in, who are your inspirations, and making connections with those people who to be kind of where you want to be.
That's great. Thank you. Blair, what advice do you have for this year's graduates?
Have fun. I think there's a lot of stress, obviously, when you graduate school, getting into the workforce. It's a brand new chapter. It's a whole new ballgame, really. But don't forget to have some fun along the way. And also, and I remind myself all this time, you're not saving lives. At the end of the day, what we're doing is designing a better world. We're designing beautiful things. We're making communication easier to understand and whatnot, but we're not saving lives. And so I think sometimes clients forget that a little bit along the way and think that what they need from you is the be all and end all. But it's not. And so you can take a step back and kind of breathe a little bit and take that time that I think we talked about here, just to sort of think about the design and whatnot. But obviously be, professional and be, I really do need that coffee now. But at the end of the day, just have fun and enjoy what you're doing.
Have fun, but not when you're writing your emails.
Not when you're writing your emails. Be serious about those, for God's sakes.
David, what advice do you have for this year's graduates?
So this is more of a kind of like interviewing / applying for jobs, the job hunt sort of related answer. But I think that's something that I didn't think about originally. Was I think it's really important to think from the perspective of an agency or a workplace that's hiring somebody when you're doing it. So what I mean by that is, aside from, of course, the technical skills and the networking, I feel like a lot of people don't think about the fact that when you're hired, ideally you will be working with your team for years. So it's important to think about who you are as a designer and a person in a holistic way, and overall whether someone will want to work with you every single day for years at a time. So the question is, in general, are you being your authentic self? I feel like it's a hard truth that an education doesn't automatically grant you a job. I know we touched on that before. You have to really work for it. So there are people who have the same level of skills, all competing for that same spot. So you do really need to stand out as somebody that people want to work with. And I find that when it's actually you, whether it's just making jokes, even in interviews, or like showing those kind of traits that you like and stand out to other people. That's kind of my advice, is just try and be authentic when doing so.
That's a really, really great answer. I really like that. Claire, what advice do you have for this year's graduates?
Yeah, that is a good answer. Sense of humor is very like, oh my God, gifts have saved us in the last 2 years, all the memes. And I guess maybe two more kind of practical things that once you get started, I don't think that I've ever said to somebody, you ask too many questions. Like, so don't be afraid to ask questions. Like, you know, if it's questions about how a program works, maybe ask a coworker. But if it's questions about process, about creative idea, like we never, like, it's always fine to bug us. So, you know, I would encourage you to ask as many questions as possible. And then the other thing I would say as you're starting out is to just seize every single opportunity you can to be in person with whoever you're trying to, even for coffee, or working as an intern or as a junior designer. Ask if what you know, is there going to be a morning you're in person this week? Because I'd love to show you where I'm at in person, because I think that in terms of mentoring and starting out in your career, these early years are when you're learning about detailing and all of that stuff. And that's what it does feel like is been a bit lost in this time. So any opportunity to do that in person, I would seize.
That's great. And JP, what advice do you have for this year's graduates? You are among them. What advice do you have for yourself?
I have two. The first one is building off what David said. Yeah, be yourself, but first identify who that is. And someone once told me, whatever is genuinely good for you can never hurt anyone. So identifying that, I think it's really important. And the second one, I said it, sorry. Yeah, it's okay to not know, but it's not okay to keep not knowing. So yeah, those two.
That's great. Everyone has like some really good topics for TED Talks here. I think this is very promising. All right, everybody. I just wanted to take a moment to thank our panelists today, Jasmine, Blair, David, Claire, and JP. It's great to spend some time with you. Really, really beneficial to hear all of your advice and talk a little bit about what the last 2 years have been like for you. Our final piece of Yes Programming for today is at 3 p.m. We have a talk with Laura Stein on why design needs optimism and optimism needs design. That's being moderated by Jasmine, who's also on this panel. We look forward to seeing you at that talk. Yeah, and you can register for that at yes.schoolofdesign.ca. Once again, just wanted to say thank you to all of our panelists. It's been great to spend the afternoon with you. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.